you've brought so many smiles to so many people here, including myself. Is there a moment at the lab that brings you a smile?
Mostly these days when I go out and walk, and lately people come up to me and they say how much it's meant to them to hear from me, communicating, and often talk about the pandemic and how they needed to hear from me in the lab. I remember those make me feel good.
What's been your favorite experience with the wildlife here at LBL?
I was on the back road here walking up there, and a coyote was sitting down, and it was trying to figure out what to do with me. I watched it for quite a while, and it's actually quite interesting. A coyote family lived near me when I lived at Berkeley Lab, right on the driveway there.
Yeah.
And so I feel close to them, actually.
What achievement are you most proud of, and why is that particular achievement most memorable?
Yeah, well, as with someone who has several children, it's hard for me to pick one as my favorite.
Okay.
But I can pick a few. DAISY, the Dark Energy Spectroscopic Survey, that went from building that to making it run to doing this spectacular science with it. That's been great on the one hand. And on the other hand, actually having 2 new buildings where people are doing this fantastic work now. I'm really proud of that.
So I'm interested to hear if you could tell me a little bit about the inspiration for the core values that the lab has, and also what changes you've seen at the lab since.
The second year I was here, I tried to think, what knits the laboratory together? How can we communicate about this? I wrote down some things about the stewardship of people and research and resources. And then I started that discussion going, and it sort of took a life of its own. And we're talking about with communication and said, what we'd really like to do is rethink what are the core values here. And at that point, that was not me. I mean, I was sort of inspired by this, but at this point it was having a discussion with everybody, because it wasn't inventing the core values, it was understanding what the core values are and giving them a voice. They were already here, but they weren't being talked about.
Well, I have an empty cup of coffee, and I was wondering if you knew where a guy could get a decent cup of coffee around here.
Well, yes, I do, but I will say we miss the cafeteria. Whenever I didn't have a meeting, I would try to walk to the cafeteria to have lunch, because then I would run into people. Yeah. It was also true that I did not feel good about having people in a building that was safe, and so we had to tear it down. We will have a cafeteria. That building that we're building is going to be much more than a cafeteria, but it will have a really grand cafeteria, and it will be the cafeteria with the best view of any cafeteria in any laboratory. When it opens for coffee, I'm going to be first in line.
Do you have any advice for an early career researcher who wants to make an impact at the lab?
Thinking hard about what's the right thing for you to work on. Getting advice, but in the end, you got to listen to yourself. You got to be something that you really think is right for you. And I think if anything, I would tell myself when I was younger is pay attention to your own voice when you're hearing all this advice. A turning point in my career was when I didn't get tenure at Princeton. Okay. That's a complicated story. And then I took out another job at Santa Barbara, and I realized I needed to pay more attention to myself and less attention to friendly senior people about what I should be working on.
I was wondering what some of your go-to stress reliefs or methods to recharge were during your time.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think people know how I walk at the laboratory whenever I can. That's my primary during the day relief. And so I do it because I need the exercise, I need to get out of the office, it's a time to think. And I run into people who are talking about something completely different. And so that's really great.
What about the lab's community and culture will you miss the most?
How much the people here are dedicated to the mission of science and technology for the nation that we do. I don't know any place where you have, from every sector of the laboratory, we're all committed to a single thing. And whenever you call on that, people respond very well. That's what I'm going to miss the most.
Thinking about the lab's mission, how do you hope the culture around supporting staff and scientists continues to evolve?
Yeah. Well, when I came here 10 years ago, and I thought about what's the job of the director to pay attention to, and it's not the program of every part of the laboratory. One of it is about the culture of the laboratory that we have for the staff, for the scientists, for the non-scientists, for people doing operations, that we have one integrated culture for everybody. That's something that I've paid attention to, and part of the stewardship was around culture, was around that. And I think actually we're doing pretty well at that, and we've got some ways to go.
I was wondering if you see any challenges, cultural barriers, since I know you must be an expert on breaking down barriers.
Well, actually, I think one of the interesting things is, for most of the things we do at the laboratory, our teams working together from different disciplines, and all these different disciplines have different cultures. So physicists actually don't talk the way chemists do, don't talk the way astronomers do, or computer scientists or data scientists. And so you got to have enough time to actually get together to form a group and think about how to, okay, well, gee, you describe the problem that way, I describe it this way. But once you make that investment of time, then is when you see a lot of return on that investment. Because once you get to a group that's working together like that, it can do great things and really fast. And that's what national laboratories can do uniquely well, is get people from these backgrounds to work together that way. It's really been wonderful how much the laboratory has adopted stewardship of research and people and resources at the laboratory and really brought it into how they do their work. And so I guess if I take one thing that is especially meaningful to me, I'd take that. It's something I knew I wanted to do when we started, and it's worked better than I thought it could.
Yeah,
So.
and that's one thing that really stands out about you is you're really caring for the people that work here, and it really shows with your special stewardship program.
And it's been the best part of the job.